The governor is inaugurated after a landslide win. We're fact-checking the claims he's making to start his second term. While state legislators prepare to consider more gun control, a suburb is moving on it tonight. Our resident egg guy, Steve Steger, tries to crack the case. Why are eggs so expensive? Is this bird flu or is it new government regulation?
I think we've got a perfect storm here.
And artists from underserved communities learn if there's a lot of support out there for their work. Tonight on Next. The Democrats who hold new supermajority at the state capitol are planning to push various types of gun control this session. But there are cities not waiting for state action. Tonight, city councilors in Broomfield are expected to vote on a series of gun control proposals. A minimum age of 21 to purchase a rifle or shotgun, prohibiting so-called ghost guns that don't have serial numbers, and requiring a 10-day waiting period and training requirement for gun purchases. When these ordinances were rolled out last year as proposals, advocates said they believe that they will reduce gun violence. Critics said, well, people are just going to go outside Broomfield to buy guns.
This is an issue that is incredibly important to me, and I believe that we need stronger laws to address the gun carnage that's going on in our country.
The only effect of these ordinances is that you're going to move business out of this town away from small businesses to big gun stores.
The No Compromises gun group, Rocky Mountain gun owners, said they'll sue if this passes in Broomfield. But the ordinances specifically cite a state law passed in 2021, which allows local governments to pass gun laws beyond what the state already has. So you'll hear politicians talk about having a mandate, and rarely do they actually have the kind of landslide that says, you know what, voters are overwhelmingly behind them. But Democratic Governor Jared Polis was reelected by nearly 20%. If it was Little League, they would have mercy ruled it. Polis has a mandate. He also may have his eyes on the White House. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger looks closer at a few policy statements the governor made during his 12-minute inaugural speech.
Putting on an inauguration takes lots of conducting and a reminder to be smiling. There's more pomp and circumstance than there is policy.
We're going to tackle crime head on.
But there was policy, an issue that both Democrats and Republicans talked about on the campaign trail.
Yes, by holding criminals accountable, but also by preventing crime before it happens to make our neighborhoods safer.
No, this is not a reference to Minority Report and predicting crime before it happens. The governor has proposed using another $18 million on top of $15 million set aside last year for grant money. Money for nonprofits, mental health centers, and law enforcement to address areas where crime is high. Money for law enforcement recruiting and training. And money to hire officers who look like the people they serve. Here's another policy statement from Polis's speech.
We're very excited about implementing free preschool for every family that wants it this coming fall.
4 years ago, Polis was pushing universal kindergarten. Twice today, he mentioned preschool. So let's give it the proper context. Voters in 2020 passed Proposition EE, an increased tax on tobacco products. That new tax will fund the bulk of universal preschool. This is Polis's last inauguration, unless he sets his sights higher, like Reverend Dr. James D. Peters Jr. alluded to during his invocation.
I have watched as the federal government has taken people who are doing a great job where they are in state government to work for the federal government. But let me warn you, he is our governor. So my message to Washington is back off. Don't try to...
We're going to hold that nodding of the head against him at one point. There was one section where Polis was forward-looking about lowering taxes and lowering transportation costs. Let's talk about that real quick. For the last 4 years, what's happened? The state income tax is lower, but not because of Polis. Voters approved that in November. On the campaign trail, he talked about lowering property taxes. No, most of us saw higher property taxes, but he did help lower the amount of the increase. He also mentioned lower transportation costs. And Kyle, you and I have talked extensively about the 2-cent gas fee that was delayed and will start again in April. There's the 27-cent delivery fee and the 30-cent ride share fee. That doesn't sound lower, but the one transportation cost that did go down last year and this year temporarily is our vehicle registration fee. So I guess 1 out of 4 we can say is lower.
As long as you remember to opt out of the $29 parks pass that they now try to tack onto your registration if you don't opt out. I'll say, one of the nice things about these inaugurals is they kind of come before the heavy politics start. There's always that nice moment of unity where the governor and the person who lost the race for governor appear together again for the first time since the campaign. Nice moment of unity.
Did not happen today. I checked, and as far as I know, Heidi Ganahl wasn't even invited. Electeds are invited, and she used to be a CU regent. All the CU regents were invited, but she is no longer a CU regent. Walker Stapleton was there today, and if memory serves, he was there 4 years ago, and I know he was at the party that was held that evening 4 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, all right, there goes my favorite part. All right, Marshall, thank you. So these inaugurals, you know, they're all about weaving together the politics and the pomp and the performance, and almost all of it went off without a hitch.
The F-16 flyover was supposed to provide a roaring exclamation mark at the end of Governor Polis's inaugural speech. The inauguration had fewer on-time flights than Southwest Airlines. Time and time again, our photojournalist Mike Grady kept looking to the sky. But like the NFL playoffs every year, the Jets were nowhere to be seen.
God bless Colorado, and God bless the United States of America.
Governor never got his aerial salute, but randomly, minutes later, as Senate President Steve Fenberg spoke.
And yet, with our plans this session, and for the next 4 years, Colorado's best days lie ahead.
Nailed it.
Pretty sure the Senate President is now the Commander-in-Chief of the Colorado National Guard. I don't know what he's going to do with that immense power. Let me ask you a question. What came first? The chicken flock being decimated by bird flu, or egg prices shifting due to Colorado's new cage-free egg rules? You will hear conservatives in this state say that the reason that we're paying so much for eggs is because Democrats passed a law requiring cage-free eggs as of this year. Our Steve Steger loves him some eggs, and he also loves him some fact-checking, so he's on a roll.
Colorado is turning an old cliche on its head because eggs certainly aren't cheaper by the dozen.
This impact on prices that we're experiencing is really a direct input of the impact of high path AI, or highly pathogenic avian influenza.
Hollis Glenn is the Deputy Commissioner of Operations for Colorado's Department of Ag. And he's talking about a rash of bird flu wreaking havoc on the state's commercial flocks of egg-laying hens.
It's a fatal disease for poultry. The laying hens and the flocks of our producers have been tremendously diminished. The supply and demand is really kind of the driving factor on why we're seeing the increase.
More than 6.2 million egg-laying hens in Colorado had to be killed because of that disease.
All of our flocks have had to be depopulated, and we are in the rebuilding process.
Bill Skebby heads the Colorado egg producers representing the state's commercial egg farms. He says the flu outbreak came at the worst possible time.
Steve, I think we've got a perfect storm here.
He blames the increase in prices on a number of factors: the bird flu, COVID,
Inflation, the cost of fuel, the cost of feed, the cost of labor, all those things that are associated in the production of eggs.
Many have suggested Colorado's new law requiring egg producers to give hens more space is driving up the cost too. It started on January 1st. Both Glenn and Skebby say egg producers created that space months before the new law took effect.
Our farms have met that criteria. They have their act together. We just don't have the hens.
Skebby does say, though, that the new law, which requires all eggs sold in the state to come from hens in those special conditions, is creating a bit of a supply problem with the state's flocks depleted.
That means we need to start finding eggs to supply the Colorado market from the same type of environments. Not every state has the cage-free or the enhanced environment to bring into Colorado while they're serving their populations right now in their own states.
It's going to take a long time to get Colorado's egg supply back to where it was. Skebby says we'll start seeing some egg production by May. Probably won't be the same level it was before. The state will go fully cage-free, by the way, by 2025. When this law was passed back in 2020, the egg producers estimated it would add about $1.50 to each carton of eggs by the time Colorado was fully cage-free. But as you could tell, a lot of variables involved in that, so it's not clear if that estimate from all the way back in 2020 is going to be realistic when we move into 2025. Now knowing the new shape of the market with all these problems created by avian flu.
Yeah, and inflation across the market. That was kind of the best explanation that I've heard, that like our producers were like ready to go, but then where do you find a whole new supply of people who didn't expect that they'd be shipping eggs to Colorado?
And now you've got the added level of the law as well, saying you've got to find a hen who's raised in that same environment. You can't sell an egg unless that hen is in that same environment. There are only a handful of states that do this way, and they're already serving their own populations. 51 million hens were killed in this entire bird flu outbreak so far this year.
Depopulated.
They were depopulated.
Yikes. All right. Thanks, Steve.
Another change causing some confusion this year is the state's rollout of the new Parks Pass system. $29 that you'll be charged for with your annual vehicle registration unless you opt out. Tonight's next question comes from Lynn in Littleton, wanting to know how park rangers will check for those passes. You're supposed to leave your registration on the dash?
Lynn, don't do that. Don't put it on the dash. The new passes are going to be printed on your registration. Colorado Parks and Wildlife told us you can just present your registration to the gate attendant when you're entering state parks, as you would normally do. If you want to, you can also save your pass information on what's called the My CPW app. There's a My CPW app. You can save your Parks Pass there in case you say you want to be able to present it to a park ranger once you're in the park.
A suggestion that Denver City Council only sign off on the largest police brutality settlements, because there have been a bunch. Underrepresented artists get a boost to their careers.
Well, I learned a lot about how to be more of like a professional artist rather than someone who just paints on the side.
That's next.
Thanks for finding us here on KTVD while the pretty important people have a party at the Golden Globes over on 9 News. Denver City Council is considering a change to the way city lawsuits are settled, just one day after approving a settlement payout over police use of excessive force during protests in 2020. Yesterday, City Council unanimously approved a payment to that couple, $300,000 worth, for an excessive force suit against the city and several police officers. Those kinds of settlements have to be approved by council, which then makes them public information. We can tell you about them here. But Councilor Paul Cashman says most of the claims council considers aren't that large, and he's suggesting that council only vote to authorize settlements for claims over $100,000. He says that would be about 17% of the claims council has voted on over the last 12 years. That proposal leaves a lot of questions about what would happen to public knowledge of the serious claims that just don't come in over the $100,000 threshold. Other city council members proposed making a separate public database for those claims, or exempting claims against public agencies. Councilor Cashman took the proposal off the table for now based on the feedback, and he says he'll come back with adjustments after considering what was suggested.
Well, our final mild day ahead of our next system of snow is starting to wrap up. We're at 46 degrees. It feels like 44 out there with winds coming in from the south-southeast at 5 miles per hour. Our HD Doppler radar is showing that big change pushing in from the west, where we've had a couple of stronger systems hitting the California coast, continuing its trek eastward and making its way into Colorado as we go into the rest of the evening hours and into tomorrow. So right now we're already seeing these scattered snow showers in portions of the high country and western slope, even mixing with a little bit of rain there in those warmer areas. But as we go into tomorrow, we're going to see the snow push its way into the Front Range and eastern plains. Most of the snow totals, though, will stay to the west, where we do have winter weather advisories through Wednesday evening. So you'll want to watch for new snow with strong winds creating blowing snow and hazardous travel conditions. And especially if you'll be traveling westward, you'll want to pay attention to that through the rest of the afternoon tomorrow. And then some areas seeing more wind than snow tomorrow, where we will have a high wind watch in effect for the far southern portion of the I-25 corridor, where those winds could gust up to 60 miles per hour. So as we wait for that snow to push into the Front Range, we'll see partly cloudy skies tonight. Overnight lows near 27 degrees, a little breezy at times, but we will watch for that snow to push its way into the entire state tomorrow, where we're going to see just trace amounts in most of the Front Range and eastern plains, those higher totals in the high country. All of that moves out late Wednesday, and we start to rebound quickly. More sunny skies as we head our way into the weekend. Temperatures back in the 50s Friday and Saturday, and then we start to cool down to more seasonal numbers for the start of next week.
Building community through art.
She's embraced by people who are already succeeding, who share that same cultural background as her.
Closer look at a program working to pair artists who share similar life experiences. Next.
platform calls itself an urban art and activism laboratory. They've been teaming up with under-resourced youth, along with professionals, to develop the next generation of artists for years. And now they've got a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts to pair artists with mentors from similar cultural backgrounds. Brian Wenlin met their first community mentee resident artist ahead of her exposition opening later this week.
They wanted to create like a safe space for the artists to feel like they can do whatever they want to express themselves through their art, and I think that they've done a really good job with that. I'm Jonna Ray. I'm a painter and a muralist here in Denver, Colorado. I think in the last few years I've been taking a hard look at like my own mental health and healing, and being on the other side of some of the trauma that I experienced is really what inspires a lot of my work.
This residency is a little bit different than our regular residency program. This was supported by the National Endowment for the Arts to uplift BIPOC and or LGBTQ artists and to give them mentorship. It's called the Community Mentee Residency.
I had never had a mentor before, and so actually getting that resource has been super helpful. I learned a lot about how to be more of like a professional artist rather than someone who just paints on the side.
And I think that it's important for Jonna to feel that she's embraced by people who are already succeeding, who share that same cultural background as her, and for her to, you know, really be able to experiment, get outside the box with her ideas, and you know, challenge the art world in general.
This piece is actually kind of one of the first ones that kicked off my art career in the last 3 years. It's called Roots, so this one's called Mary. There's a little bit of like a spiritual aspect to it. This one was kind of thinking about being a little like chaotic and, you know, the journey of like finding yourself, and that it's not always pretty and perfect, but there's still some kind of balance to it. I think there's some symbolism through color and shapes, and so that's why I kind of portray that in like the after trauma experience. For me, it's like this sense of like excitement for life. I feel like it's going to open up more opportunities for me. I think that exposure is really important for all artists. So I'm hoping to have another gallery show at some point, because this has been like really fun and fulfilling for me.
Jonna Ray's exhibition, easy for me to say, is Indigo. Opens Friday night, runs through the end of the month. Your feedback on the state automatically charging people for state parks passes and the details of how that'll work next. It's a sign that winter in Colorado may contain winter. Viewer named Rich sent us this photo from snowy Wagner Park up in Aspen. Winter conditions may exist. They put that sign there clearly. Let's be honest. Somebody slipped and fell in the middle of winter and sued over the fact that winter exists, right? That's why these signs are up. If you see something that catches your eye, email it to us next at 9news.com or use the hashtag HeyNext. A lot of smart questions and feedback about the idea of the state tacking on the state parks pass for $29 to people's vehicle registration unless you opt out. Bruce says, is $29 registration park pass vehicle specific? Yes, it is. CPW says that it is tied to your registration and tied to your plate number. So if you plan to take multiple vehicles into state parks, you need more than one of those registrations. Linda says that they recently got this and they were advised to leave it visible on the dash, their registration, if nobody was at the entrance. Obviously, that's not a great idea. It's got your name on it. One copy has your address on it. She says it'd be great if clerks would stop recommending that. Yes, I would agree. Thanks for finding us on KTVD. See you next time.